Bane, the Black Hand, the Lord of Darkness, one of the most powerful, feared, and influential evil deities to have ever existed in the Faerunian pantheon, the de facto god of organized evil in the Forgotten Realms setting, as well as the de facto leader of the Dead Three. At least, he was all of that. But what happened? You might very well understandably be confused at this point in time, depending on how well informed you are in the god Bane, or more accurately put, the former god Bane. You see, Bane had been the only god of the Dead Three to not only fully beat death, far earlier than either Myrkul or Baal, but also to survive the post-spell plague intact, retaining the rank of greater deity throughout this time, from his resurrection from the smoldering husk of his son Iyaktu-Xvim in 1372 DR, until the completion of the Second Sundering in 1487 DR, when he was, in a most inexplicable fashion, demoted from the highest status of godhood to effective non-divinity as a glorified quasi-deity. No official explanation was ever offered for this, but we can speculate if we examine the history of the realms. So before we're able to postulate a theory as to why Bane was demoted to mortal status, despite remaining incredibly potent and successful throughout several calamities that brought low many other gods, we must rummage through a bit of Forgotten Realms history and lore. Forgotten Realms is a differentiated campaign setting, first came out in 1987. Traditionally, the de facto campaign setting had been Greyhawk at this time. The Forgotten Realms campaign set provided an overview of the lands, gods, history, and some characters, and was meant to be distinct from Greyhawk. This release was backed by a number of popular novels, such as the Icewind Dale trilogy, which included the now famous character Drizzt Do'Urden, among others. And the Forgotten Realms quickly gained a significant fanbase, and the timeline of this box set begins in 1357 DR, or just 1 year prior to the Time of Troubles, the event that would precipitate an entire era of both divine and magical instability that would characterize the entirety of the setting for 3 decades, which in Forgotten Realms history and lore is sometimes referred to as the Era of Upheaval. And one must dwell on this for a little while, because it does seem odd to release a new setting with stable moving pieces, only to turn it on its head shortly afterwards. The Time of Troubles was narrated by a series of books called the Avatar Trilogy, saw many gods dead, including the 3 gods that would canonically come to be called the Dead Three. And this was fitting, in some sense, since 2 of them, namely Bane and Myrkul, had effectively brought about the Time of Troubles through their theft of Eo's Tablets of Fate. The post-Time of Troubles period was characterized by many reconfigurations and realignments of churches. Above all, the churches of the Dead Three, in particular because they had been replaced by a single deity, Cyric, the Dark Sun, then god of strife, murder, the dead, lies, and illusion, and much of the subsequent ecclesiastical history of the realms takes account of how the worshippers of the Dead Three either allied themselves with this upstart deity or rejected him. Eventually, Bane's son, Iyaktu-Xvim, took on many of Bane's former worshippers, as Cyric never really suited Baneites particularly well, as Bane had been rigidly lawful and Cyric had always leaned towards chaos and later fully became chaotic. But as you must know by now, Bane eventually outwitted death itself, and uniquely among the Dead Three, came back in 1372 DR from the seed of life that was his son Iyaktu-Xvim as a fully fledged greater god, having additionally taken on the portfolio of fear and fully reclaiming his former worshippers. And it's worth repeating this, because Baal and Myrkul never achieved this. Baal would not fully return until well over 100 years later, and Myrkul enjoyed a pseudo-life as an inhabitant of the Netherese artifact known as the Crown of Horns, and neither of them had ever returned as a full god. Sometime later, Cyric the Mad God, with the aid of Shar, managed to murder Mystra, ushering in even more chaos and throwing magic in the realms into disarray. But throughout this period, Bane managed to persevere. Many other gods perished during this time for a variety of reasons, and the pantheon of Faerun was shaken to its core, but Bane persisted, as a bastion of tyranny and evil, until 5th edition came about. And though in general, 5th edition Forgotten Realms has been almost intentionally vague concerning the fate of many gods, we do know that after the Second Sundering, which was essentially just a hard reboot of Realms cosmology, that Bane had been reduced to mortal status as a quasi-deity. Now, this sort of makes sense for his allies, Myrkul and Baal, as neither had truly ever fully returned to divinity. But Bane, in contrast, had resurrected himself and persisted throughout all the challenges and changes that had taken place, only now to be reinstated as an overpowered mortal. Setting aside the simple possibility of bad writing, which it still could be, what accounts for Bane's fall from grace? Unfortunately, there are no official theories on this, or really any theory that seems more likely than the others. One possibility might be a type of divine punishment meted out by Eu, who, although being an overgod, could theoretically harbor ill will towards Bane for his theft of the Tablets of Fate. Why were so many other gods reinstated, such as Tyr, who died in mortal form fighting hordes of demons after he had surrendered his divine power to his servant Torm. But Bane, by way of contrast, was demoted. In theory, Ao might play no favorites, but perhaps when re-establishing the cosmic laws of Toril and reinstating so many deities, he chose to demote Bane and to promote neither Merkel nor Baal, simply because he does not like them, which honestly does not seem likely to me. After all, he permitted Bane's resurrection in 1372 DR. The truth is, we just don't know, yet it could be part of something still more mysterious, directly related to the plot of the video game Baldur's Gate 3. When Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 were released well over 20 years ago, they probably were seen as separate entries in the lore of the Forgotten Realms, which is to say that the events of the Baalspawn saga probably were seen to have actually happened, and were part of the history, but at least at the time, it would have been unlikely to envision that the Baalspawn saga would later become part of the actual canonical lore. And yet, reading any account of Forgotten Realms history today, the man named Abdel Adrian has been canonized as the Baalspawn to have emerged victorious from the saga as told in the video game, and the god Baal's ultimate plan of resurrection via the Baalspawn has since become canon as well. The parties involved in concocting this had probably arrived at some kind of agreement, possibly due to the popularity of the games. If this is true, it means that BioWare at the time and Wizards of the Coast, at the very least semi-officially, had come to some sort of accord, and were working together. Enter my theory about the current relationship between Larian Studios and Wizards of the Coast. We know that there was a long courtship period between Larian and Wizards of the Coast, and that they are cooperating with each other on the development of Baldur's Gate 3. And this leads me to believe that whatever plot is being spun by the Dead Three, above all the now mortal Bane, is something that was probably jointly thought up by both Larian and Wizards of the Coast, or at the very least has been greenlit by Wizards of the Coast. This would mean that whatever the outcome of Baldur's Gate 3, there will likely be a canon version of it that will become part of the official lore, and may make or break the future and fate of the Dead Three in the realms. And it might be that Wizards of the Coast, assuming it was not just bad writing, because let's be honest, 4th edition was just terrible in that regard, wants the story to play out in Baldur's Gate 3 via Larian Studios. Given the history of Baldur's Gate, and its now firmly established canonicity in Forgotten Realms lore, I'm fairly convinced that this could be the case for the ensuing plot in Baldur's Gate 3. The only other alternative is bad writing, and poor implementation in explaining why such a persistent and successful deity as Bane was demoted to mortal status, and, for the moment, I refuse to entertain that possibility. Hopefully, the real reason will be revealed to us in time. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please hit the like button, share, comment, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.